In this video, we'll break down the evidence, connect the dots, and explore why XRP, stablecoins, and blockchain could play a much bigger role than most people realize. We're finally seeing the truth behind everything. The truth about the Iran war, about the Venezuela situation. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent just laid it all out. And if you listen closely to what he says in the clip I'll play later in this video, it really opens your eyes to just how fragile our fiat system actually is, and how close we are to an emergency-style shift where crypto becomes a much bigger, almost weaponized piece of the US financial system. I know that sounds alarming. It's not a good thing. Because right now, the dollar is genuinely on the chopping block. Let's start with a post from Coinbase's chief policy officer. He points out that as we reflect on Lindsey Graham's passing, it's worth remembering that national security isn't just about troops, tariffs, or sanctions. It's also about the financial infrastructure the world relies on every day. For decades, America's strength has come from the combination of the dollar and the infrastructure built around it, which gave the U.S. massive economic leverage and made the dollar the foundation of global commerce. Now that infrastructure is shifting, open blockchain networks and dollar-backed stablecoins are becoming part of the next generation of financial rails. As China and others build alternatives that bypass U.S. influence, the choice is simple: lead or cede ground. That's why regulatory clarity matters so much right now. Ambiguity isn't neutral, it's a strategic liability. There's also a June 23rd report on how China is undercutting the U.S. on Iran. Beijing has expanded use of the yuan in oil trade and other international transactions, giving Iran and Russia a way to dodge Western sanctions. It's not just the Coinbase executive saying this. Cynthia Lummis has also said that the dollar's reserve status wasn't an accident. It was the result of American leadership, and that same kind of leadership is needed now in digital assets. We're at an interesting point in finance. For nearly 2 decades now, dollar dominance has been slowly eroding. The dollar's share of global FX reserves has hit its lowest level this century. Central banks' grip on the dollar has slipped from around 72% to roughly 57%. A slow erosion that's reshaping how the world thinks about money. The dollar once made up more than 70% of global foreign exchange reserves. That number now starts with a 5. A few things worth keeping in mind here. Is the dollar going to collapse overnight? No. Is it going to be replaced overnight? Absolutely not. But there is a slow slide happening. The dollar has shed roughly 14 percentage points of reserve share since the early 2000s. That's meaningful, but it's played out over a quarter century. And the decline hasn't been a straight line either. After bottoming at 56.32% in Q2 2025, the dollar's share ticked up to 56.77% in Q4 2025, then rose further to 57.13% in Q1 2026, likely due to valuation effects and other short-term factors. But here's the wild part. Going back to Q1 2017, less than a decade ago, we've lost more than 8 percentage points in under 10 years. That's something to take seriously, especially since we're still printing enormous amounts of money, still carrying unsustainable debt, and still using the dollar as a financial weapon. 2022 is a perfect example. The sanctions on Russia pushed a lot of nations to start building alternative payment systems and payment rails. And that's exactly where crypto comes into the picture. I've said before that the dollar is suffering death by 1,000 cuts, a long, slow decline that sometimes gets accelerated by specific events. And right now, the biggest accelerant is the Iran war. Even back on March 25th, when the Iran war was fresh, Deutsche Bank warned that the conflict was threatening dollar dominance by pushing countries toward using the Chinese yuan in oil trade. And that's exactly what's happening now, as confirmed by the June 23rd report. Is that enough to cause an outright collapse of the dollar? No, not even close. But Japan is a good example of what a bigger shock could look like. If something there goes seriously wrong, the dollar would take a real hit. And that's when we could see something like an emergency reaction. A lot of people are calling this a potential yen carry trade moment, where capital shifts heavily toward crypto, or even XRP. You can speculate on that all day. But the real question is, how is the US actually responding to all this? Is it using these conflicts to prop up the dollar? And the evidence increasingly says yes. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent explained that the actions Trump took in Iran and Venezuela were designed to reinforce dollar dominance. According to him, Venezuela had been selling discounted oil to China without receiving dollars in return. Now, with sanctions eased, Venezuela is coming back into the dollar-based trading system, with the dollar set to be the centerpiece of its trade going forward. He said the same shift is happening with Iran, where ongoing negotiations point toward oil trade being invoiced in dollars. In his view, everything the administration is doing is aimed at reinforcing the dollar's position at the center of the global currency system, not because it ever truly left that position, but because it needs reinforcing. He also said he'd expect Russia to want to rejoin the dollar system once the Russia-Ukraine conflict ends, since U.S. liquidity, capital markets, and institutional depth remain unmatched. He added that one of America's greatest strengths is its ability to course correct, and that the U.S. shouldn't be shy about leaning into its advantages, sharing them with allies while pushing back against those not aligned with U.S. interests.
Dollar dominance is essential, and everything President Trump is doing here is, if you look, the new Venezuela is invoicing in dollars. They're coming back onto the dollar system. They've been sanctioned. They were not allowed to translate or to transact in dollars, and now the dollar is going to be the centerpiece of their trade. They were selling discounted oil to China and not getting dollars. We're seeing in the Iranian negotiations, the Iranians will be invoicing in dollars. So everything we are doing is pushing the dollar back. It's never left as the centerpiece for the global currency system, but we're reinforcing it. I would anticipate when the Russia-Ukraine conflict ends, that Russia will want to come back in the dollar system because, again, the dollar, it's our liquidity, it's our capital markets, it's the depth and breadth. Everyone wants to be here. And I think many times, the great thing about the United States is we course correct when we go too far one way or the other. And I think we should not be shy about flexing where we have advantages, and where we have advantages, share with our allies and push back on those who are not aligned with us.
That all sounds great on paper, but the real driver behind the aggressive moves in Iran and Venezuela is likely the intense pressure building in the markets. And historically, the go-to move to prop up markets is war, paired with stimulus, which is exactly what's been happening with money printing up until recently. On top of that, history shows a pattern. Whenever dollar dominance faces a real challenge, the U.S. tends to go to war. It's plausible that Venezuela was selling oil in yuan or other currencies, and that alone could explain the conflict. For a long time, the dollar's core backing was the petrodollar agreement, which many now argue is effectively dead. That may well be true, though most goods are still priced in dollars today. So the real question is, what happens next? Are we watching a shift where war is breaking out largely because dollar dominance is slipping? It's clear the U.S. is trying to lock down control of the oil market, but that strategy doesn't seem to be working as intended. So the pivot appears to be towards something else entirely: stablecoins. A Deutsche Bank report highlighted by All in Crypto shows that U.S. dollar stablecoins now dominate the market at $278 billion, reinforcing dollar dominance. Stablecoins and cryptocurrencies like XLM and XRP could become the on-chain rails for the dollar. Same underlying technology, Same infrastructure, just wider crypto adoption. Because constant wars to defend dollar dominance simply aren't sustainable. The better path is a shift toward a digital-based system, something Scott Bessent himself has been pushing for quite a while. But this only works if there are clear rules in place, which is why passing the Genius Act and establishing regulatory clarity matters so much. That's proving difficult to get across the finish line right now, which raises the possibility that the conflicts are also serving as something of a delay tactic. Whatever the exact motive, the pattern is consistent. Every time dollar dominance is challenged, the US has responded with war to defend it. That may be part of why we're seeing such a heavy push toward crypto within the US right now. And recently, the Federal Reserve itself put out a statement on exactly this topic. So there it is, straight from the Fed, a clear articulation of how a brand new technology, stablecoins, could be used to reinforce the dollar's global standing. It really does look like there's a deliberate playbook here to protect the dollar at a moment when its dominance is eroding. We're seeing conflict because the dollar is being challenged. And that pattern is especially visible in the Iran war, where the evidence increasingly points to dollar erosion as a root cause. And this trend isn't going away, especially as the underlying infrastructure keeps shifting. Open blockchain networks and stablecoins are becoming the norm. China already has its digital yuan. Russia already has its own stablecoin. If the US genuinely wants to hold on to its dominance, it needs regulatory clarity. And on that point, I agree with the Coinbase executive. That's exactly why I think this is heading towards something close to an emergency-level push for the US to get that clarity done, both to stay a global leader and to protect dollar dominance. That's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed it, drop a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more free content. Follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord, both linked in the description. Thanks for watching. Peace out, guys.